in the medical doctor and traditional institution and traditional religion worship that you hold there?
Okay, I've had that question come up on a number of occasions, but the way I always respond to it is there anything wrong in having a medical doctor as qualified as I am, who also pastors a church, or who is also an imam leading a congregation? So if your answer to that is a no, then certainly there wouldn't be anything wrong with having a medical doctor having the same status as I do, also being an Ifa priest.
Have you ever been
There's a religion
and there's
a profession. Everybody must have a religion.
And there's no clash.
There's no clash.
But often, let me ask you this question. Have you had an embarrassing situation of your patient discovering that you actually profess traditional religion and you're a medical doctor? Hey, please don't touch me. I'm a Christian, I'm a Muslim. Have you had that experience?
Well, I think more often than not is the reverse. You have more and more people clamoring that that's the doctor I want to see. You see, whatever we do, let our actions, our attitude talk what our religion is, not you getting somewhere and say, I am this. Let people find out. I've had instances when people come back to my consulting room and say that, I just had somebody say, you're a babalawo. Yeah. And I say, yes, I am. And they say, oh, you are behaving like a pastor. I said,
how does a pastor behave?
A pastor behaves like somebody who has the fear of God. That means a babalawo also, when you find a true one, also behaves like somebody who has the fear of God. So I think I've just been opportuned or privileged to be in a position for people to actually see the true outlook of who an Ifa priest is. And I always tell people, don't judge by our statements, judge by our actions to know, does he really know the God he is serving? And the book he claims to profess, does his actions, are they in conformity with what he professes?
Before we cut to the chase, in the Yoruba traditional worship,
yes,
what is the place of God, the omnipotent God, the I am that a Christian profess, that Islam profess? Is that a place for God?
The simple answer to that also, which I challenge anybody who has a contrary opinion to come and tell us. Before the white man came, Yorubas had existed. We had a culture, we had a religion, and we had that name, Olodumare, Oluwa, Obalana, Obaloni, Obateniola Ferigbeji Omi. It was not when the white man came and they now talked about a certain God, and we now had to call a conference of Yoruba elites to find the appropriate word to translate God into. So that means God had always existed in our own society also. And what they were able to just define was, okay, this must be the same God. Because even in Ifa corpus too, Ifa had always talked about God Almighty Olodumare being in existence.
So that's a place for the suffering God.
Yes. And even when you see things, when something is done for you, even whether you go somewhere to do a charm or whatever, they pray, the end word will still be Lagbara or long.
But the confusion, Dr. Atanda, is in the area of when you see an average traditional worshipper,
yes,
Sango worshipper, Ifa worshipper, yes, Oshun worshipper, they seem to profess Ifa, Sango, or Oshun, and not the God. And the confusion is this. Somebody told me that Orisha are eniti Oridasha, those who did extraordinary things. Yes. Shango was a human being, lived in Oyo. But if he's now worshipped as God, not the means to God, the suffering God, that's the confusion. Because even in the Bible, we have St. John, they were canonized. We have James, because they did extraordinary things. Nobody worshipped them. We still worship God through them as disciples. But people say that in the traditional worship mode, traditional worshippers worship deities, Shango, Ifa, Oya, and not the supreme God, the sovereign God.
Let me explain that. Religion and culture are interwoven. The Yoruba race is blessed with a culture that gives reverence to elders.
That's right.
So when you have people who have been exalted and have done things in the past to distinguish themselves from others, we give special reverence to them. Even look at, let's leave then and come to a near future. In the time of Obafemi Awolowo, even till after his death, maybe I would say it was only in this last round of elections that you didn't find people making posters and still putting Awolowo's photograph there. That is the culture of Yoruba man. But unfortunately, when you speak English language, you create some confusion. I would rather go to Yoruba language and you see that Yorubas never confuse the role of God.
Okay.
What Yorubas will say is Ansin, Olong, Ambo, Orisha. You have never seen it anywhere for Yoruba man to say, Onsin Orisha.
Okay.
Abi, we have never. Ansin Olong, Ambo, Orisha. You are making reverence, propitiation to the gatekeeper. And every religion has a gatekeeper. There's no single religion that has talked of man and God without an intermediary.
But when you offer
whether
sacrifice,
you say it's the Son of
who do you
God,
offer the sacrifice to?
it's to God Almighty Olodumare through the intermediary. And there's no religion that does not have it.
But you see traditional worshippers offering sacrifice to Ogun physically.
It's
to
he
the God
is
of Iron.
an intermediary.
Between God and the people.
Because our own understanding is God Almighty has so many deities which you can equate to probably ministers who are in charge of things. I can give you an example. You have a president of a nation and you need water. Even if you talk to God Almighty, who is the president, that we need water in our community, he will still refer you back to the Minister of Water Resources. So if you have knowledge and you already know that there's a Minister of Water Resources, there's nothing wrong in you talking to the Minister of Water Resources, because God Almighty has given him that responsibility and that privilege to do and undo with water resources. That is the way the deities exist. God is so big that he has created lieutenants to take care of different things. And usually when I talk, I usually don't want to pry too much into other religions. But if you look closely, there's no religion that does not have sacrifice. Some are just neck deep in sacrifices than others. But everybody, they're really sacrifices. At some point in time, some religions...
In my faith, you just sacrifice praise.
In some religions, at some point in time, they sacrifice animals. Or let me say, they use animal at some point. If they may choose not to use the word sacrifice because they are running from that word. But even if you go and check your dictionary, sacrifice is a means of appeal.
And appease.
An appease to the unseen. God is also an unseen.
Another thing I want to ask you before we go into the meat of our discourse today. Most people these days, they find the traditional worship as a bit dirty, clumsy, and the truth are far in between. You don't even know the truth.
But
somebody like you, a medical doctor, is a consultant for that matter, practicing traditional worship. How many of you guys are in this food of traditional worship? Somebody in your mood.
I think maybe we'll do a survey and a little challenge. Maybe we can carry camera to make it live. That maybe we start from Ilajue, or no, Ilajue may be too far. Maybe from Ojutu right down to Old Garage. And we'll stop people on the road and see the number of people that nowadays you find them proud enough to put the Ifa bead or Batala bead on their hands.
And they will proudly displace it?
Proudly. Or come to when I celebrate
they
my
believe is
festival
that.
now, you find medical doctor, you find engineers, you find professors. It was not what it was some years back. Nowadays, I think people are becoming to have a reawakening that there's actually something about this our culture, this our own religion. If this religion was actually bad, are we saying our fathers never knew God? They were in the dark, they were blind, and life was peaceful. We had respect for humanity. You could trust each other. When I say yes, it is yes. When I say good morning, it is good morning. And you say they never knew God, then I would rather say hysterically, then that means it pays us not to know God. If now we are saying we now know a new God, in quotes, whereby you have churches, mosques, at every 3 electric poles to one another, and the society is this bad, then we must be asking us a question.
Another scary thing about traditional worship is human sacrifice. How much of human sacrifice do you do in your religion?
There's no human sacrifice in traditional
But we
worship.
see cases on social media of some babalawos in some corners and asking for blood.
I'll give you an example. The last time
money-making ritual for people.
I'll give you an example. The last time BBC made a post and said 3 babalawos were caught for money ritual in Lagos, and during the thread of their post, the letter mentioned their names as Wakili, Rashidi, Sefiu, Jacob, and I called them.
The names don't matter. Actually.
I'm coming.
It is
and
what
I
they
called
profess
them.
and what they do that
I
matters.
called them and I said, did you do your research enough to find out that you have a few hours to confirm that or refute it, or we meet in court? And what happened? In 3 hours, they pulled down that post. Because we are clouded by religion, once you find something bad, you think it's a babalawo. Have you not found churches that human bodies, babies have been exhumed from? Has it not been in this Osogbo that the student of Uni Osun was killed and said it was done in the house of an alpha with a mortar and pestle? Let's come off that. Let's face the reality. When you find one, show me is a babalawo. There's nothing. I'm not disputing they are not bad eggs. There can be herbalists. There can be people who have come with knowledge out of the blues. But Ifa does not teach human sacrifice.
So you are disclaiming those
yes, we have done that several times. As I represent the body of traditional religion worshippers, I've told government, I've told the police, I've told DSS several times, when you find one, show me.
But in the trajectory of your religion, it took place at some point.
No. Let me tell you what happened. In history, there was law and there was judgment. Do you agree with me?
Yes, definitely.
And nowadays, people die by the hangman. People die by electrocution. There's death by firing squad. The only place such people were being confined to was Igbo Ogun. Not that they were used for human sacrifice.
But for what?
If you have committed an offense and you are supposed to be killed, because we still kill people today under law. He who kills must also be killed. That's what the law also says. So when such people are supposed to be killed, they're either killed by the hangman, the Abenilori, in the shrine of Ogun, or they say, commit him to the forest of no return. What happens in the forest of no return? There's no food, there's no water. The man is eventually going to die by hunger. That is not offering him as a sacrifice.
But as what? You sent him to the gallows.
When the law court says this man should die by hanging, or an armed robber was killed by firing squad, did you perform a sacrifice with him?
No, that was the law.
That was the law then.
In action.
Yes, that was the law in action.
Okay.
Not somebody not performing any offense and just say, okay, go and pick Mr. A because we want to kill somebody today. Never in Yoruba tradition or Yoruba history. Tell me one town where you had that. It's either there was a curfew and somebody went against the curfew, or somebody was said to have slept with another man's wife, or committed armed robbery, and there was a judgment. And then judgment was yes or no. And that was why our society was sane. And remember today, that is why China is sane, if I'll come back to a recent history. The transformation we had in China today did not happen until 1986.
That's right.
Majority of it was 1990, 1991, when they said corruption or any other ills, you will die by hanging. Is that sacrifice? So if tomorrow in Nigeria, we say all corrupt leaders, from any point down to bottom, up to down, will die by hanging, where do you commit them to? It's the shrine of Ogun. Because Ogun is the just.
Do you believe there's too much secrecy in your religion? It's not open. There's no accountability. Is it because what you do most often are shrouded in secrecy? You don't share knowledge. Nobody knows what you do. Is that the reason where people ascribe dirty things, dangerous things to your faith? Are you doing anything to change that narrative?
I don't think so. I think it's because most of us have been clouded by Western religion.
But you don't share knowledge.
There's a fear.
There's no book of your father that I can read to have knowledge.
That's because you have also decided not to find out. If you open your phone now and you go on Amazon, you will find at least 25 different books. If you go on Google, you will find books. So there are books. But as I also said, every religion or culture emanates from a point, their tradition and what God has endowed them with. The Yoruba man was endowed with memory. Necessity is the mother of invention. Because Yorubas could commit easily to memory. That was why we said Ifa was oral citation. But as time went on, now there's documentation. We also know that the other religions too, I don't want to contest whether a certain book of God came from heaven and somebody picked it up from somewhere. There are various stories around that.
The same Yoruba people believe that
the question I would ask you, is who said that?
Yorubas. It's in the culture of the Yorubas.
So why did Yorubas say that?
Because they want to pass knowledge from one person to the other.
Exactly, so why did you not say we are not passing it? Okay, let me cite another example. Let me cite another example.
Don't transfer knowledge.
Let me cite an example.
Freely.
Let me cite an example.
I can buy a Bible. I can buy a Quran.
I was born in the early 70s. I didn't exist in the 18th century, 19th century. I was born in the early 70s.
Yeah.
That means there must have been a transfer of knowledge.
Because your father chose to.
Yes.
Your father is a practitioner of the religion you profess today. Yes. So he chose to transfer knowledge.
And so many people,
he hasn't hidden it.
So many people too. No, so many people too transfer knowledge. There are schools today in Osun State. If you go to Ejigbo local government, where Ifa is being taught in the schools, I think it's
a government school.
Yes, government
or a private school.
Government school.
Is that in the curriculum of the school?
Well, because it was the community that built it, and they were able to establish that in Ejigbo local government.
But not recognized by government.
Yes. Okay. So that is the challenge we should all have. That if there's actually something about this, it is our culture, it is our religion of our fathers, then why don't we have this religion also taught in our schools?
Okay.
The way we teach Islamic religious knowledge, the same way we teach Christian religious knowledge. You find it in other climes. When you go to China, they teach their religion in their schools. When you go to Japan, they teach their religion in their schools. We're even talking about religion. We are so blindfolded here. We have been so hypnotized to the point that we didn't even take religion away alone. We took history out of school's curriculum. We even took our language out of school curriculum, and we call it local language. Who says my language is local? It's just that mentality. You know the new one that still marvels me?
Yes, Dr. Atanda.
Why must everybody want to talk like a white man?
I know you have a lot to say, but before I allow you to say it, we're going to go on a break. The question I'm going to ask you when we return, I don't know much about your religion. I want you to educate me. The saying is that there's a difference. I can't see the difference between the Babalawo and Onishigo. I want you to explain to our viewers after this break.
Gladly, I'll do that.
The program is Partnet Question. But don't forget to follow us on our social media handles on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, at Western Spring Television. And you can also watch us live and subscribe to our YouTube at Western Spring Television, where we return. Dr. Sheyi Atanda is on the program. And the program is Partnet Question. See you soon.
It was a Euro-American trade in slaves by which 12.5 million Africans were captured from their indigenous homelands and transported via the Atlantic to Europe and the Americas. The transatlantic slave, also known as triangular trade, was the worst form of man's inhumanity to man and the most costly in human life of all long-distance global migrations. Hundreds of Africans chained tightly to plank beds in the belly of slave ships in horrific conditions were transported via the Atlantic and stripped of all human dignity on arrival in Europe and America. It is the greatest crime the Caucasians committed against the black race. It is impossible to discuss the transatlantic slave trade without a copious reference to impoverishment and underdevelopment of Africa and its peoples. The triangular trade left the continent in ruins. Western Springer Television identifies transatlantic slave trade as a watershed event in history. The Korean War of 1950 to 1953 pitched North and South Korea against each other in response to intrigues by nations beyond their border with different interests from those canvassed by the two brother nations. The Korean War had all the nuances of an external conflict induced by powers that were interested in subjugating North and South Korea. Japan had leveraged on its military power to annex Korea in 1900 and imposed a military union that did not sit well with the citizens. Japan not only lost its war of conquest against Korea, all its powers were obliterated by the effect of the World War II. The end of World War II got Korea divided into two nations along 38th parallel lines by the instrumentality of the United States of America and the Union of Soviet Socialist Republic. The Korean War lapsed into a Cold War when it stopped the prying eyes of external forces into the internal affairs of a nation now divided along its north and southern territories. Western Spring Television identifies the Korean War as a major event in history.
You're welcome back. The program is Pertinent Questions, and my guest is Oluomo, Dr. Oluseyi Atanda, President, Traditional Religion Worshippers Association in Osun State. Doc, you're welcome. The question I promised to ask was, can you draw the line of demarcation between an Onishegun and a Babalawo?
Thank you.
Who is a Babalawo? Who is an Onishegun?
Thank you. Let's quickly do English language. Babalawo is a priest of Ifa. Onishegun is a herbalist. Onishegun is a profession, a job. Babalawo is a religionist. Onishegun can be a Christian, Muslim, atheist, or traditional religion worshipper. It's just practicing herbal medicine. And you find them in the society. If you go to the traditional medicine fairs, you find white garment people there also who profess to know one thing or the other. You find alphas, you find traditionalists there. So that's a trade. While a Babalawo is a priest of God who worships God Almighty Olodumare through the deities and does not go to church, neither does he go to the mosque. Talks to God Almighty and attends the Ifa place of worship for his own congregational service.
So for medicinal purposes, you can approach an Onishegun. But when you want to step it up, you go to a Babalawo.
Yeah, however, the Babalawo has an added advantage because Ifa teaches everything. The greater majority of herbal medicine was also from the knowledge of Ifa. So when you find a Babalawo practicing herbal medicine, he has the advantage of being able to do research into your problem by going through a divination process. So I always look at it again, probably because I'm a medical doctor. I always tell people that a babalawo is like you walking into a hospital to talk to a medical doctor, and onishegun is like you going into a pharmacy store and just talk to a pharmacist or a chemist.
Okay.
Because all he's going to do is headache, all right, take this, go and use. If it doesn't work, you come back again, take this. But what does the medical doctor do? We draw your blood. Let's do some tests. So what does the babalawo do? It does a divination for you to find out what the issue
Babalawo
is.
digs deeper.
Exactly.
Onishegun just dispense drugs. Thank you very much. Now let's call to the chase of our discourse today. We've had a lot said about our exalted traditional institution that we should hold there ordinarily. But these days, too many others have emerged through what people call questionable processes and means. What is the implication of that? How should a Yoruba traditional Oba emerge in deference and with recourse to the tradition?
Thank you very much. It's very saddening, but I want to sound a note of warning. We have not seen anything.
How?
It's going to be worse.
You sure?
Yes, sir. Once we dump our culture, dump our tradition, dump our language, so many ills will emerge in this society. The family unit is breaking down. Friendship is breaking down. Compound family is destroyed. Communal life is destroyed. It's the same thing affecting the Obaship institution. So we all just need to pull a break. Now, coming back to what you have said, to become an Oba has a protocol, has a tradition, how it is being done in days of old. The summary of it is an Oba dies, there is a rotation process. There are set number of royal houses in every community whereby you can trace their lineage. That, oh, it was when Adewan became Oba and he begets his son Adetu. Adetu did not become Oba and Ade3 became Oba. And you can trace Ade3 to be the grandson of Adewan. And there are royal houses who already have a sequence of how they get to the throne. After one becomes two, after two becomes three. That was what we met. And after it is the turn of the said ruling house, then that ruling house is supposed to have a mini screening for eligible princes to emerge from that ruling house. The eligible princes will now be dependent on various factors. One, you must recognize the last words of the last Oba. You must recognize also the state of that community. Do you want an Oba who is learned? Do you want just a nobody? Then when those princes emerge, you have to look at their antecedents. Is his name in the black book of the town? Does he have any ugly record? Just like somebody wants to become a governor, there should be a screening process. The difference between Obaship and governor is for governor, it's every man's race.
But no tradition is static. The chieftaincy title has gone through evolution, has gone through development.
Yeah.
Are you saying something has gone fundamentally wrong with the process?
Yes.
Now things are done according to the law. Hitherto, there wasn't a government in this structured
There was a government.
In this structured Western form. But now we have a government, we have a constitution. There are laws that guide traditional institutions. So once things are done in compliance with the dictate of the law, what is the problem with that process?
No, let me quickly take you back. Then there was a law, there was a government. Because the law and government then was even for you to become Oba, even if after you have been selected through a process, somebody still decides to give you the Ewe Akoko. So that means there was a law.
Symbolic.
There was a government, not just anybody saying, I am the new Oba. Now we are trying to replace the one who gives the Ewe Akoko, who in history was the Alaafin of Oyo. But now we are trying to replace that with Mr. Governor. To say, I sign you into law.
But that is the law.
I agree. But the point I'm making is, before it got to the point of Alaafin giving the leave, which Mr. Governors are doing now, there was a process before then. Is that process now that we are thwarting with for selfish reasons? Why should you decide somebody to become Oba where there's no record of such household ever getting to the throne? It's not a local government chairman.
What if the law empowers the governor to ascend, to be the final approving authority?
So he can appoint anybody as king.
And the law allows other kingmakers or warrant chiefs. What is wrong with that? If that is the law.
I've not seen that law that says that.
Oh, there's a provision where warrant chiefs is allowed. If kingmakers can reach a consensus, warrant chiefs can be composed by government.
If.
Yeah.
So government must also now be able to prove to us that in the case of town A, the kingmakers have not been able to arrive at a solution within this period of time. And in history also it's like that. I'll give you examples. When it is the turn of Royal House 1, there's a time given to them. When Royal House 1 cannot have a consensus and come up with princes, then the kingmakers take a decision and move it to the turn of Royal House 2. It happens also in the past. So there's a process. And when the law of today, which we are talking about, wants to do, you must do this within the confines of the royal houses, not just anybody. Because it's a traditional institution.
I don't think any governor has chosen just anybody. The problem people complain about is the person choosing is not in line according to the Gazette and the law.
Then he has become anybody.
No governor has appointed anybody outside the royal.
He has become anybody. Once they have said, oh, this man is not one of those to be appointed, then he has become anybody.
No, he's not one of the people eligible now.
Because he's not eligible makes him anybody. When it is not your time, it is not your time.
But he's a prince.
I'll give you an example. We are writing a final WAEC examination. We are writing a maths exam, and you are answering English questions. No matter how well you have written that, it's a failure because you are writing a wrong exam. You can't put a round peg in a square hole if he's not eligible. As you have hit the nail on the head. He's not eligible at that point in time. So there will be crises. And that is why when you find such people being picked, they dare not go through the traditional process because he knows it is not his time. I challenge any king that has been appointed and you think you are truly fit for the throne, go into the traditional seclusion.
You said
and go and meet your ancestors to talk to them.
Doctor, you said something earlier on that sounds like fear-mongering to me. You said we haven't seen anything yet. What else?
Yes, what I meant by we have not seen anything yet is we are fast losing our culture, losing our tradition, and it's affecting morals in the society. Look at the level. Then those days, it was not that easy for somebody to take his life or her life. You know the way people commit suicide now?
Is that traceable to go to the tradition too?
Because we have...
It's not because of the frustrations in the society fostered on us by the realities of the economy?
Apart from
depression?
Apart from that, we are losing some of the values of human life. Even apart from suicide, the way we kill each other now. It was not like that. We're not saying these things were not there before, but it was not this rampant. You could only count a few. But now it happens everywhere. The level of deceit, the level of treachery, the way we betray one another now, that was not the human culture. That was not the Yoruba culture. We were our brother's keeper. Now what do? We lick boots. You cannot look a man in the face and tell him the truth. Yobani, tomo ya meji ba wonu only bara on soro. Wa koroju jade ni. But nowadays, what happens? We lie to one another. That's why I said we have not seen anything. Fast the society's decaying. Look at the level of divorce in the society. despite the fact that we get married in the churches, we get married in the mosques, what happens?
Are you saying that lack of moral values
It's because we have destroyed our culture.
is attributable to the fact that we have forgotten about our culture?
Yes, yes. You see, in our culture then, how can you marry a woman and you end up with divorce? It's not possible. Because before you married, there was a process. There was a research done, physically and spiritually, to see if you were compatible.
Are you saying divorce is antithetical to our religion and faith?
Yes,
or to our tradition and culture?
Yes, it is.
But why do we have koyawo, koko in the language? That means it has happened before.
It has happened before, but what happens? It was a very rare thing. I'm saying you have the surge of it. It was a very rare thing.
Perhaps there are data and statistics to back your claims up.
No, it was very rare. And when you look at some of them, it was probably because those who forcefully got married to one another. Another thing which makes it very rare then is, it was not me and my wife. If you remember, when the likes of us got married, your wife was not handed over to you. Your wife was handed over to your father. Ọmọ yín tún lékan léni. So where will that father put his face?
I think this breaking news is very relevant to the topic that we are discussing. Listeners at home, we're on pertinent questions, but this is breaking news reaching us fresh from the newsroom. Osun State Governor, Senator Ademola Adeleke, has ordered the newly installed royalties in the towns of Ikirun, Ire, and Igbajo to vacate their stools with immediate effect. Again, this is breaking news. News just reaching us from the newsroom indicate that Osun State Governor, Senator Ademola Adeleke, has ordered the newly installed kings in the towns of Ikirun, Ire, and Owa, and Igbajo to vacate their stools with immediate effect. We'll bring you details in our subsequent bulletins. But don't forget to follow us on our social media handles on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter at Western Spring Television. And you can also watch us live and subscribe to our YouTube at Western Spring Television. That is the news, Dr. Atanda. The governor has acted. But do you see that as political? Is it witch hunting those kings politically because his predecessors, that they are now on the same political page, install them, or is just in deference to tradition and culture and the process of their emergence? What would be your immediate reaction to that?
Says, it can be either way. It can be because it is indifference, and it can be political. But if we follow the protocol, the standard, we wouldn't have these issues. And this is what I mean. Even when a prince emerges, a prince is announced weeks ahead of his installation. A prince goes into spiritual seclusion where he learns Ifa as knowledge. He learns tradition. He learns humility. He learns patience. But nowadays, you announce somebody's name today, he gets crowned the following day. We are playing with a traditional balance. We have turned the balance, so there must be some uproar. I hope the decision of this new governor too will not even land us into more crisis.
Yes,
that's why we say point. That when we start a problem,
a vicious circle, ripples effect.
Yeah. So that's why we kept saying that let our governors tread softly. And let princes also tread softly. Yes, you may want to become king.
Dr. Atanda, some say that some traditional rulers are actually desecrating the exalted or the hallowed policies that we knew.
Yeah.
They are no more as hallowed, as sacred as they used to be. Will you attribute this to the manner of emergence of these kings,
yes,
or
sir,
the personalities of the kings?
I think it's both. I think it's both. Or rather, I would rather say it is the process of selection. If the king is a madman, if he's a crazy man, he will never get to that throne. If that because there must be a process of Ifa divination. Family must have screened. They know their princes, the one who is cool-headed, the one who is a madman. They wouldn't put his name forward. And when they put his name forward, he gets to the screening of Ifa. And Ifa will tell the kingmakers that if you make this one king.
But is it true that even Ifa worshippers can be easily compromised today with the power of the Naira? Is that true?
It's possible, but he will meet his Waterloo too.
So,
There's nothing you
if
do.
they mislead, why must we count so much on them if they can't trust them?
In how many places have
to be an arbiter
in how many
cases like
places
that?
have they misled? Have we not have judges who have been said to have been corrupt? Did we, because of that, cancel the judicial process? No, because you have
Two wrongs don't make it right.
Because you have
don't
one
use the
black
alibi
egg.
of the fact that we have corrupt judges to.
No, I'm not using it as an alibi. I'm only always bringing whatever you say
said that
closer home.
Traditional worshippers, they uphold traditional etudes.
Yes.
And they don't compromise. So when you have cases of compromises that mislead towns and villages in the process of choosing kings, where they take money in exchange for giving us the divine instruction of the Ifa,
yes,
that is a big compromise.
Yes.
So
and
that people lose confidence and trust in the process.
In how many places have that happened?
So many places.
No, the few, maybe you tell me. The few that has happened in our history, the priest also paid for it. The king also paid for it. He didn't reign for long. His time was heralded by a lot of ills in the society. And what happened? That his lineage was banned from becoming king again. That was the consequences those days. So any priest that wants his salt will not do that. So you don't, if it's a don't, you don't cross that line.
And now
when you cross it, you will pay for it sooner or later.
Dr. Atanda, the governor has issued an executive order.
Yes.
There's some kings, 3 of them.
Yes.
Igbajo, Ikiru, and of course, Ire, should step down from the stool and vacate palaces.
For the process to continue appropriately.
We haven't seen the full text and what the import of the statement, with due respect, and what the governor intends to do. Will you rather believe or think that the governor should have allowed the legal process to come to a fair conclusion before taking this decision?
Well, I'm not part of them, but what I had on your radio earlier on, somebody was on the radio before I came on studio and said there was a legal process on
in some instances,
which had not been concluded before government jumped the gun. I'm not speaking for the new governor, but maybe what they intend is vacate office and let that legal process complete. If that's what he wants to do, then thumbs up for him. But if he is also going to remove somebody and replace with someone else, then we are still back to ground zero. Let legal process get done, go back to the traditional process. And if we do the traditional process appropriately, then there should not be a legal process.
So how do we rekindle honor, dignity in our traditional institutions?
I think first,
those values are fast being eroded.
It starts from Mr. Governor and whoever becomes the commissioner for chieftaincy affairs.
What of the people?
It starts from, because we have seen towns whereby kingmakers wanted to appoint somebody based on that, and they said Mr. Governor sent for them and said, tell your babalawos that this prince must emerge as king. And the babalawo said, if that be it, since Mr. Governor already knows who he wants to become king, we'll wash our hands off it, then there will be no divination process. Why do we make a divination? To know what we don't know. But if Mr. Governor already knows that A is best for it, so be it, and let everybody know that it was man that picked king, not divinity.
Are you saying Ifa is right at all times?
Yes, if God can never be wrong.
Ifa is not God.
Ifa is the word of God.
There's God. There's Ifa.
Ifa is the word of God.
God is the supreme being.
Yes, but nobody sees the God Almighty Olodumare.
But why must we believe the words of an Ifa oracle or Ifa priest that it can be compromised
because
easily?
It has already been documented that Ifa is the esoteric language of God. It is divinity.
That's your belief. Some don't believe, subscribe to that belief.
But whoever wants to look at the tradition of Yorubas and talk about Obaship, you cannot absorb it from Ifa. The moment you say there's no Ifa, then there's no king. What you have put in place is a ceremonial chief, maybe a sheriff.
Don't you think it's possible to exalt the words of Ifa to the level of a divine pronouncement? It's tough for us to believe that whatever an Ifa priest says is sacrosanct, is divine wisdom or divine words from God. Is that not a challenge in that?
There's no challenge if you have learned the process, because the same way you will not challenge when your pastor tells you this is what the Bible has said. If you don't challenge that because you have a belief in it, I give it to you. So the same way you cannot challenge the other one because you don't have knowledge of it.
So, in one word, what is your advice to traditional rulers that we have here today, in Nigeria today, putting forth?
Well, first, I want to give kudos to the traditional rulers who work their salt and know that they are sitting on the throne of their ancestors and they are the custodian of our tradition, our religion, and our culture. But for the traditional rulers who do otherwise, I am asking...
I know you have issues against the Oluwo of Iwo.
I'm not talking about Oluwo now.
You have said it several times.
I'm not talking about Oluwo now.
But you have issues with his style.
Certainly. You mean Mr. Rashid?
We beg your pardon, His Royal Majesty, the Oluwo of Iwo.
No.
I will not allow you to call him what he's not.
We're going to come to that on another day.
Duly appointed by his people and government. That you disagree with things.
And so be that for him and Iwo. But for the rest of us...
That is the Oluwo of Iwo.
I'm not desecrating the stool of Oluwo, because the stool of Oluwo was established by Ifa in Obara Uchua. But if somebody gets to that throne and says he's above Ifa and he has nothing to do with Ifa, then he has nothing to do with the crown of Udidere.
But that does not withdraw the certificate from him as the duly appointed Oluwo of Iwo as we speak today. No law has proven that.
I've not said that has been withdrawn, but he has lost the respect.
From you, not from his people.
If I, as a senior traditional priest and the mouthpiece of traditionalists can say that, then you wouldn't query me, because even a musician addressed him as Rashid.
Thank you. Dr. Oluseyi Atindara, thank you for coming on Pertinent Questions. Guess the program has been Pertinent Questions. Don't forget to follow us on our social media handles on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter at Western Spring Television. And you can also watch us live and subscribe to our YouTube at Western Spring Television. And remain yours sincerely, Femi Adefila. See you next week.